It appeared to be a straightforward delivery van. However, the Renault Estafette subtly changed the way people, products, and ideas were transported throughout Europe. More than 500,000 were constructed, and they became a common sight on French and international streets. Today, we'll reveal the true causes of this cherished workhorse's disappearance as well as some startling facts that most people were unaware of. The Estafette was a significant departure from what Renault had previously produced. Something that most people were unaware of. This van completely changed the game at a period when the majority of vans had rear-wheel drive and engines tucked up front like conventional trucks. In 1960, front-wheel drive was still uncommon in commercial vehicles. The concept was straightforward. Engineers could significantly reduce the floor by removing the driveshaft that connected to the rear wheels. This meant a van that seemed more like a useful extension of your workspace rather than a truck, easier loading, and more room. This resulted in reduced stress, faster delivery, and a more comfortable ride through congested city streets for drivers. Additionally, it gave small business owners a subtle sense of modernity on an emotional level, making them feel as though they were part of the future rather than trapped in the past. The startling thing is that this astute design decision also sowed the seeds for its eventual demise. The van's comfortable power handling capacity was restricted by front-wheel drive. The Estafette started to demonstrate its limitations as businesses wanted bigger payloads and stronger engines over time. It was designed for efficiency rather than brute force. And that equilibrium began to seem out of date in a world where power and ability were prized more and more. Then, unless you've really entered one, you might not notice anything. The Estafette was driving at an atypically forward posture, nearly atop the front wheels. Imagine that the road is directly in front of you as you sit behind the wheel. It provided drivers with outstanding visibility, particularly in congested cities. You may feel totally in charge, navigate through narrow spaces, and evaluate distances more readily. This was done strictly for utilitarian reasons. Shift the driver forward to optimize luggage capacity. However, the impact in the real world extended beyond usefulness. It established a special bond between the machine and the driver. The sensation of being a part of the road itself is still remembered by those who drove it. However, this design became problematic as safety regulations changed in the 1970s. Crash protection was inadequate because there wasn't much room between the driver and the front of the car. What had been novel became to seem dangerous. Then one of its most endearing peculiarities appears. Long before sliding side doors were popular, the Estafette had them. That may not seem revolutionary now, but it was revolutionary in the early 1960s. Drivers could stop, get out, and carry on with their business without worrying about cramped parking spaces thanks to the sliding mechanism, which replaced swinging doors that required room to open. Urban deliveries on congested European streets necessitated more intelligent solutions, which was the crux of the problem. It had an instant effect. Tradespeople, postal workers, and bakers might move more quickly, work more productively, and easily navigate urban areas. It's one of those elements that subtly influence the style of contemporary vans. Once you are aware of this, you begin to perceive the Estafette as a trailblazer concealed in plain sight. However, not all aspects of it were innovative. The Estafette had comparatively modest engines under the hood, many of which were taken from passenger automobiles like the Renault Dauphine. This made sense at first, a lightweight van with decent fuel economy and little power. However, as time went on, expectations shifted. Companies desired increased torque, speed, and the capacity to support larger weights without strain. The Estafette found it difficult to keep up. Particularly on highways or steep slopes, drivers frequently found themselves exerting a lot of force on the engine. This restriction was caused by Renault's preference for cost-effectiveness and simplicity over performance. And although that initially worked flawlessly, it gradually became a drawback. It's a bittersweet vehicle, perfectly adapted to its initial function yet unable to change with the times. The story is made much more intriguing by the extent to which the Estafette permeated French daily life. It was more than just a car. It was a feature of the landscape. It would be transporting workers during the day, delivering bread in the morning, and even acting as temporary campers on the weekends. It evolved to represent small companies, neighborhoods, and a more leisurely, intimate lifestyle. Its accessibility is the cause of this cultural influence. It was very adaptable, inexpensive, and simple to maintain. The impact was significant in the actual world. It was essential to entire livelihoods. Families were raised in this environment. For many, it was more than simply a van. It was a daily companion. It is rare for modern cars to make an emotional connection. Even while it was well liked on the streets, it had trouble keeping up in the background. Competition had intensified by the late 1970s. Other manufacturers' new vans had more contemporary styling, more safety, and better performance. Even Renault started concentrating on more recent models, such as the Renault Traffic. The explanation was unavoidable. The Estafette's once brilliant design had surpassed its limits due to technological advancements. This change was bittersweet for drivers. Yes, they got better cars, but they also lost something they knew and trusted. Additionally, there is a little-known detail that deepens the narrative. One of the first Renault cars to be produced in large quantities outside of France was the Estafette. It was constructed in nations like Algeria and even modified for other markets. The plan was to increase its market share and satisfy rising demand. Renault's desire to become a major player in the world was reflected in this choice. The effect was slight yet significant. It transformed the Estafette from a regional symbol to a global force. However, this growth also revealed its shortcomings. The Estafette was not always able to satisfy the demands of various markets. It served as a reminder that what functions well in one location may not always translate to another. The fact that it vanished so silently may be the most unexpected aspect of all. There was no big announcement or emotional farewell. In 1980, production just stopped, and newer versions that better suited the evolving world took their place. Its character is the reason for this silent departure. The Estafette never cared about prestige or attention. It was about working without complaining, day in and day out. And with the same humility that it had served, it left when its time was over. However, its disappearance was felt profoundly by those who knew it. The streets have a new appearance. It felt different at work. There was no longer anything familiar. Nevertheless, its legacy endures decades later. Restored Estafettes that have been meticulously maintained by enthusiasts who recognize what makes them unique can still be seen at classic vehicle exhibits. Character is more important than luxury or speed. It's about a time when vans could be a part of your life narrative, when simplicity was a strength, and when cars were made with a reason. You can't simply replace that. Therefore, competition and evolving technology are not the only factors contributing to the disappearance of the Renault Estafette. It is about a world that has evolved. A world that wanted greater authority, more security, more of everything. And with that change, a little but dazzling machine silently vanished from the face of the earth. However, the Estafette is more than simply a vehicle for people who remember it or are learning about it now. It serves as a reminder of how well-considered design can influence daily life in ways that you can only fully recognize once they are gone. Have you ever seen a Renault Estafette or perhaps even had a ride in one? Tell us about your recollection below. Additionally, if this story made you feel a little nostalgic, share it with someone else who might find it enjoyable.